my frustrations were continuing to grow little by little. And the final straw was the guy that was most my boss out of anybody. He just came in one day, slammed the door and said, "Brett, keep coming up with your ideas. Just keep them to yourself." You know, I felt kind of muzzled and I couldn't even share my ideas, was sort of one step too far. And it was then that I started to really seriously think about my exit. And, you know, about 6 months later, I managed to find a couple co-founders with, you know, some different skills, a developer, a designer, and then that was it. You know, raised $250,000, quit my job, and then lived off ramen for a long time.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 140. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before we get into it, if you could please share this episode if you dig it, or any of the other ones. I'm trying to get some more exposure around the show. Today's guest, your name's been flying around for a little while now, so to have you sit in front of me is pretty cool. I was out with Erica Merve during Stampede, caught up for the first time, and your name came up then, and that's when I was really like, I got to get this guy in the show because she spoke very highly of you. So please name and who you are.
Appreciate that, man. Erica is a legend in her own right. My name is Brett Colvin, and I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of a company called Goodlawyer, based here in Calgary.
Amazing. Yeah, so it's funny how, you know, obviously online you and I connect on LinkedIn, and just watching and listening, and I hear other people talking about you and what you're up to in the company. So this is going to be a cool one for me to just sit back and listen to that story. So wind this thing back. Take it back as far as you want to go. Where you born, parents, siblings, interests, school, jobs, and we'll kind of like go all the way to Goodlawyer and what you're up to today.
We are really winding it back, eh?
Which is like, I love it because I don't know shit about you.
Yeah.
I honestly know.
You're going to learn something about me, my friend.
Which is, it's a cool experience for me just to, you know, because I see where you are right now. But
Totally.
to actually have the backstory is going to be really cool. So take it back.
Maybe when we're off the clock, we'll get a little bit more of your backstory. So, I mean, people say it's rare to be born and raised in Calgary, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I run in a lot of different circles, but I feel like I know a lot of us. I'm not sure about you, but Calgary's always been home. Grew up here, born 1989, right after the Olympics and the Cup.
Oh, you're like, that's a good year.
Sort of, yeah. I think I might have been a bad omen though, because we haven't won the Cup since. But yeah, born and raised in Calgary. I'm a Southeast boy. Mom, clinical psychologist, still working at the Rocky View. Dad was a stockbroker. He passed away about 12 years ago. But I think that combination is very, I don't know how unique it is, but I think it definitely helped shape me. Parents split up when I was really young, like when I was 4, my brother was 2. And, you know, it was always go to dad's on, you know, the other weekends, and then mom's place, which was a lot more serious. My mom's a super mom, and, you know, growing up, me and my brother, the amount of soccer that we were playing out, that was my dream for a long time, was to be a professional soccer player, till dad wised me up a little bit. But did take it a ways and got to play in college and that kind of thing. But anyways, back to the, you know, growing up with the more serious, super caring, you know, safety blanket mom, who also happens to be a psychologist.
Yeah, dude.
And then also getting, you know, less frequent, but still very frequent exposure to my dad, who I would say was certainly more of like the dreamer, less disciplined than my mom, but definitely the bigger dreamer. You know, as a stockbroker, I think it's hard not to be. And I think those sort of two personalities really coalesced in me and my brother Sean, with varying sort of weights. You know, if my brain is some sort of LLM or algorithm or something, I definitely got a little more dad weight than my brother did. And, you know, I think I always had dreams, again, when I was young, wanting to be a professional soccer player, which I was dead serious about until I was probably 15, 16. You know, went on trial in England, and, you know, that was like the thing I wanted to do. Kind of ill-advised for someone born in Calgary. Yeah. Around a bunch of hockey players and a lot of opportunity in sort of different sports. But, yeah, I think the passion to be a, pro soccer player at one point has completely translated that same sort of ridiculous ambition or hope, and the work that sort of comes with it. So I would say that, between 15 and 16, when I kind of gave up the I'm going to be a pro soccer player dream, and I did have some buddies that chased it a little further, but it was kind of that smart motherly advice. Focus on school. You're good at that. That's going to carry you a long way. And she was always really adamant. I was pretty good. My brother was even better.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he was probably the best player in Canada when he was 16, but he's also now a psychologist, funny enough.
Mom had some influence.
Yeah, just a little bit. But, went to college up at U of A, played soccer.
Yeah. What was the, like growing up as a kid, was it just like soccer all day, every day, indoor, outdoor,
all day,
all consuming,
every day, all the time?
What was your first exposure to it? It's weird. It's what's really
probably
weird.
When I was like 4 or 5. My mom's dad, Bill, he who was also a doctor at the Rocky View. He, they migrated to Canada when my mom was like 8 or 9 from Scotland.
Okay.
And yeah, I think it was really my grandpa, we call him Papa, that got me and my brother into soccer early. And my mom was thrilled that we weren't in hockey because hockey was more dangerous and expensive.
Exactly.
So yeah, we just got kind of hooked on soccer early, and we were both good.
Yep.
And, as sports are now, and I played basketball and volleyball and all those things in junior high, played football in high school. But soccer was always front and center.
Yep.
That was the thing where we were both, excelling in like the national training program and like really at like the highest level that you could be.
Yep.
But making that next step to like the pro level in Europe somewhere was a leap that, I just don't think I was good enough to take. Maybe my brother was with the different kind of encouragement perhaps, but, I think we both landed pretty good. And the other thing that I've been doing since I was 4 or 5 is running little businesses. I'll never forget me and my brother. He's a couple years younger than me, so I had him hunting for balls. We were out in Kelowna. We always went out to Kelowna in the summers, and in the back of Uncle Barry's house, he backed onto like the 15th green or something, and I would be posted up, and I wasn't selling lemonade. I was selling toonie balls. Yeah, he'd be finding them, and I would just be cleaning them and then trying to sell them to the guys on the 15th hole. And that was kind of my first taste of running a business. And my brother and I, and then some buddies parlayed, I think some of my entrepreneurial spirit into running, some landscaping businesses. We made a ton of money aerating in high school. Oh yeah, that's a money maker.
Did you buy a machine, or did you rent one and just like hammer it on the rental days?
I should have bought a machine, but I didn't. And so we just would hit up Home Depot on like the Friday night, put it in Dad's old shitty van, and then Saturday morning we'd be up at the crack of dawn. We'd have a couple jobs lined up, and we always went in twos, and one of us would be aerating and the other one would just be banging doors. Who wants it? Who wants it? $50, but it's got to be right now. And yeah, that was always a very lucrative 6 weeks.
How long did you run that for? A couple summers?
Yeah, we probably ran that for like 3 or 4 summers in a row. I would even have jobs and stuff, but it was just such good money. On a weekend. You could put like $1,000, $1,500 in your pocket and just be laughing. But I also loved it.
Yeah. What'd you love about it?
I just have always loved business. And I think, again, that probably the entrepreneurs were definitely more so on my dad's side.
Yep.
More of the academics on my mom's side for sure. Doctors and stuff. But yeah, I think it was growing up, going to Dad's, and we'd be playing board games and we'd be playing sports. It was always competitive, but the board games were always funny because even like as long as I can remember, like honestly, like 4 or 5, we were also betting on board games.
No way.
So I started learning about cutting deals and taking risks very early. And I don't know what it is. I think that, that entrepreneurial bug just gets some of us, and I've had it as long as I can remember. And the first real business was really at the end of my undergrad when I ran a painting franchise, which, anyone who has kids listening, if they think their kid has a bit of an entrepreneurial itch, can't recommend it enough, because that was the first real business I would say that I ran, and I couldn't stop thinking about painting. Everywhere I looked, I'd be like looking at the walls and the ceiling. I'd be like, oh, this place needs to be painted.
You're just like, how many square feet is this? I think that's like a $1,200 job.
Yeah, just driving down the street, I'd just be like, oh, opportunity, opportunity, opportunity.
How did you...
Yeah, shoot.
Those two things, right? Like you got the drive of sport as a youngster, which is like...
Definitely.
It's a real thing. And then you got this entrepreneurial kind of thing right beside it. How do your like teachers handle you? Because at a young age, to be looking at it through those, that, especially that entrepreneurial lens, when school's kind of set up for structure, right? Like, did you ever feel like you were confined because of school, like, and the parameters?
Maybe a little bit, but honestly, I think that feeling really kicked in later. Certainly during law school a bit, maybe a little bit undergrad, and then definitely when I started private practice as a lawyer. But honestly, like, that was more my brother. My brother was, rambunctious, and like you couldn't keep him pinned to a chair. And I was always like kind of a goody two shoes in that regard.
A quiet, like just...
I definitely don't think anyone would have described me as quiet.
But you just like, you were okay to stay in your lane.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I would always, expedited learning is something that I think has always been kind of ingrained. So I'd always look for sort of the shortest path to the outcome. And that definitely became like abundantly clear in how I approached law school and things like that. But I always like had this, I don't know if it was the mama pressure or where, if it was just more intrinsic. But I always wanted to succeed. And so when it came to school, I wouldn't be the one reading every page of the textbook, but I would be cramming for the final. And, I'd say for the most part, doing pretty good. Yeah.
Soccer, it's funny we're talking soccer. I had this buddy of mine on the show.
I probably know him.
Hasn't come out. His name's Charlie Trafford.
I know Charlie, yeah.
So, we were
one of the few guys that made it.
That's it.
Yeah,
so like
totally.
One of the captains of Calgary FC, just for reference.
And also played in Europe for a while.
Yeah. So, I've had this soccer talk with him, and it's like, in that era, there wasn't a lot of,
He definitely know the Colvins.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. He would definitely know me and my brother.
It's like, the hockey world's small in Calgary, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the soccer world just goes, it's like another layer of connectedness.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there wasn't a lot of examples for youngsters to kind of figure out like a pro path, right? Because there's...
Owen Hargreaves.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
There's like one person to look at.
Yeah.
And if that path doesn't fit, you're like, oh, fuck, I can't do it.
Totally.
Did you... Like when you're going after, like you're playing at a high level, is it like that drive to be a pro player? Were you making like sacrifices at a young age to kind of make this thing happen? Or is it just this like natural thing? You're just moving with passion and energy and
I think that like objectively, yes, definitely sacrifices were made, not just by me, but my mom and other people around me.
Yeah.
But at the time it did not feel like that. Even if I sort of contrast that with Goodlawyer now, like it's more obvious the sacrifices that I'm making today to build Goodlawyer.
Yeah.
But in both situations, it didn't really feel like it. In fact, I'd say between, when I, let's call it 16, when I figured I probably wasn't going to be going pro in Europe, playing for Arsenal one day. And when I left the big firm to start Goodlawyer, what would that be, like 12, 13 years later? I'd say that in between period where I did my undergrad, knew I didn't want to be an accountant, and then was like, okay, well, this law school thing seems like, another good step that mom's going to be pleased with. And, dad had just passed away and he was pushing it hard and I wasn't ready to start my own thing yet. That was like definitely quite a gut punch at that time. And, I think for me, that was sort of I would definitely not call it like the lost years.
Yep.
from like, I wasn't progressing, but I didn't know what I wanted to do during that time. And, becoming a high slang corporate lawyer, that seemed like a good opportunity to pursue. Everyone was, and certainly mom impressed and happy with that trajectory because it felt successful and secure. But I never had that same sort of passion for it that I did, growing up trying to be a pro soccer player. And I definitely have found that passion, and perhaps even more so in this new adventure, building a company.
Which is rare, right? Because that like youthful passion, and that, because you're kind of blind to what reality really is.
Totally. And, I think that sort of rationalization, that analysis around 16, and it's like, okay, the probabilities.
What was it? What was your like thought process? Like your check and balance of like, yeah, I don't have this.
Honestly, it was I can like
One
identify the moment. Yeah. And remember it was a weekend. We were at Dad's, me and my brother, and, he'd had a few pops, and he just like off the cuff said something about, I was never going to be as good as Sean, my brother. And that was accurate, highly accurate, but it was definitely like a dagger into, And, at that stage, I didn't think it was a likely outcome, but I was still chasing it.
Yep.
And it was really kind of that moment around 16 where I, looked at it, I think, a bit more objectively or rationally, and said, you know what, I'm good. I can go and play college ball, and I can, help pay for my university with this. I can go, and enjoy soccer, and it wasn't like all for naught.
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm pretty good at the school thing, and, there's probably more realistic opportunities a little closer to home.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that moment, I wouldn't say in isolation would have done it, but given the circumstances was, definitely a sort of course correction for me.
Coming out of high school, do you have an idea what you want to do? Did you have were you like?
Not a clue.
Not a clue. So like, you're good in school.
Yeah.
Grade 12 ends. Lost soul or?
No, I remember when I was trying to decide what to do in university, coming out of high school, again, grades strong, got optionality, and engineering was historically harder to get into, and I could get into it. And I remember I took physics just for that reason. I remember also my dad. My dad's had very major influence over me just in like more sort of blunt doses.
Yeah.
But I remember asking him, Dad, should I go into engineering or should I go into business? And he looked at me and he's just like, do you know how to fill the air on your bike? I did, I think, but it was definitely point made. I did not and do not have an engineering brain. So business school made a hell of a lot more sense. And then, what am I going to major in business? I just took that one. I was thinking finance, but Dad pushed hard for accounting, and I was kind of indifferent to it all. And, so listened to Pops and did the accounting thing. Got an opportunity to go on exchange. So I got a minor in strategic management as well, because that's all you take on exchange is strategic management courses.
Sounds fancy.
Yeah. Vienna, though, unbelievable city. But yeah, that's how I ended up, coming out with a BCom. And, that was right around when my dad passed away. And I didn't have a burning desire to go and be an accountant. I had met with like some of the big four and like kind of going down that process. But I think fortunately I'd written the LSAT on a whim before going to Vienna. And so I'd kind of unlocked this law school door. And, again, I wasn't really in a state of mind where I felt like I was ready to start my career or, walk away and keep building this painting business that was.
That's what you had. I was going to ask you. So all through university, you had the painting business?
No, just at the end of, right after my undergrad.
Okay.
And before law school, I ran it for that summer. And I fucking loved it.
What was your early years at university? Were you working then? Or were you just humping aerators around neighborhoods in the summertime?
I was probably still humping some aerators around, yeah. But no, I had
random
first
jobs?
couple summers, I served and bartended at Joey's. And then I did the same thing at Brewster's. And then I had like got my, my internship. Have you ever heard of Value Drug Mart?
Yes.
Okay. So Value Drug Mart has a little known finance arm called Value Invest, where they, basically the purpose of Value Invest is to go, around small towns in Alberta. I don't know if they're outside of Alberta, and look for opportunities to buy more drugstores. So that was one summer during undergrad, was just me bombing around rural Alberta in small towns and like, counting how many people went into the shop and like looking at the different, and then, I can't say I had much to add from the finance lens at that point, but that was like one gig that I had. That was the first one where I had to wear a, dress shirt into work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Khakis
not
and
counting the server, they gave you the uniform or whatever, but
that, the restaurant biz, like I worked in clubs for a long time. It's an interesting world.
it is.
You learn like a lot of things, whether it's like multitasking, obviously cash,
Dealing with people, dealing with shitty people.
Yeah. Like shitty hours, but also right beside that, there's a lot of fun.
Totally.
It's an interesting, there's a number of characters that have come out of that industry and really like thrived.
Oh yeah.
There's also the backside of it where it can chew people up and just
Spit them out.
catches them.
Yeah. Well, I am very fortunate that our head of operations, one of the earliest guys on the Goodlawyer team, a guy named Taylor Smith, his brother's actually our CTO, Parker. His last gig before Goodlawyer was running a couple bars in Vancouver.
Oh, no way.
Some of the big ones. And he had basically kind of reached the ceiling of, sort of that career trajectory. And, I think there were, some of those fun or, if they bleed into dark aspects of working in the industry, that he was looking for a change on.
Yep.
And the Goodlawyer opportunity, getting to work with me and him go way back, playing soccer together, and work with his brother. It just was this sort of great moment. And, we probably wouldn't have got him but for COVID because, they all shut down for a while and he was just a free agent all of a sudden. And he joined us with absolutely zero sort of directly applicable experience, but the transferable skills, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he's brought a level of, customer service to the legal industry that is, I think, unparalleled. And, frankly, gives us a huge advantage because we're bringing all of these, his big one is always, first drink on the table, like as fast as possible, and bringing that urgency and that, customer focused mentality about the little things to our world is, something that's kind of brand new.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. And his ability to build and train up a team. It's been awesome to watch him develop over the last, 4+ years. And, I don't think he is the head of ops that he is without, having spent a decade running bars and dealing with all the headaches and wins and everything that happens in that world.
Yep. Why'd you love that painting business so much? Like you've said it twice now, like you lit up, you're like, I fucking love that thing.
I did. And,
but before you tell me how much you love it, how'd you get into it?
I had a really good friend of mine, her name's Keiko, and she is now the queen of painting in Edmonton. She'd done it for a few years during undergrad. Yep. And she was always bugging me to do it. Me and her were always close and, had a tremendous amount of respect for each other. And she's like, you got to try this thing. And then, with enough probing, and then I had this kind of gap before law school, I said, okay, like what better than to try to run my own little business. And at the same time, I was living with a guy who him and his dad run Ultimate Renovations, Paul Ritchie, who ultimately became Goodlawyer's first investors. We were living together at the time, and we decided to do it together. And so for that whole summer, I think there was 4 roommates. Everyone worked for us, and then a bunch of our other buddies. And then we started hiring. I think at peak we probably had 20, 25 painters.
Wait,
yeah, I only painted for like a month.
So you're on the tools, okay?
And Paul, to this day, does not have a clue how to paint a house. But we got to build this business, and going from selling our first job, where we're like, me and and Motzi, who was one of our roommates who I played U of A soccer with. We went into this house like we knew what we were doing. We didn't have a fucking clue what we were doing.
Just like clipboard and a tape measure.
Yeah, and we sold it. And then, the selling it actually wasn't that hard. I was always pretty good at selling something. But once we got in there and we actually had to paint it, the family's gone for the day and we're in the house and we're like, we gotta paint the upstairs. How do we do this? And, we stumbled our way through it. I like to think we did a pretty good job. And, we just started parlaying it from there. And, one of the funny things we did as a painting franchise, shout out to University First Class Painters. That's who I did it with.
I was hoping you were going to plug him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we set the rookie record that year. It was good.
Cool.
But we, after we did maybe 4 or 5 jobs, I was like, we got to make a website. And so one of the guys that was working for us was my stepbrother, Matt. And I was like, Matt, you're not painting today. Just because he was also technical. He's a developer now. And anyways, I was just like, you're building us a website. And he went on, Squarespace or whatever the easiest thing was and built us a website. And then we, put the sexiest pictures that we had on that website. And, now, because we made it look a lot bigger than it was, you know? They didn't know that every job we've done was on the website. Photos from multiple angles, kind of like the mini, Mickey Mouse version of this. But now we had a reference point. And it was funny because I got a call the other day from someone from UFCP and everybody's making websites now. All the little franchisees that's like best practices is making a website to showcase the work that you're doing. And it had nothing to do, my passion for it, I knew pretty much from the get-go was not about painting. It was about building a business.
So how did you, I love it because you're like, fuck, I painted for a month maybe, but how did you, what did you really dig into? Did you naturally have a skill or a desire to figure out what parts of the business did you really love?
I think ultimately it's about connecting the dots and, you got marketing, then you got sales, and I always enjoyed selling. But then you have fulfillment. And how do you fulfill in a painting context? You find some good painters. And we also took a very different tact running that franchise where, the sort of playbook was you go sell a couple jobs, you learn how to paint, you paint those jobs and you become a better painter, and then you hire your buddies and then, you help train them how to paint. And, at the end of the summer, you've built this nice little business with a few of your friends and, you're all still kind of these student painters. That didn't make a lot of sense to me because I didn't want to paint. I wanted to build a painting business. And so very quickly, and we got really lucky with this one guy, Tom, who was out of work and, kind of overlooked a little bit, but we just hired some really good painters. And I remember countless conversations with homeowners and, we'd be showing up in our nice polos and looking all professional. I'm going to law school, so I got a little credibility there. And our prices were way higher than, the college pro prices. And I'd have homeowners saying, why would I go with you? I really like you, Brett, but you're double the price of the college pro guy. Why would I go with you? And I would say to him, because I've got real painters and you can go with them, but you're going to be calling me later. So, I'm bringing you the best of both worlds. We've got pro painters and I'm still a student. So you're getting a much better price than, you should be. So we were very successful that summer.
Did you, the sales piece, natural for you?
Yeah.
Just
I've never even really thought about it. In fact, with us building out a more robust sales function for the first time and understanding spin or gap sales, whatever you want to call it. And more of these kind of term consultative sales, these longer sales cycles. I'm actually less good at it than say our COO, Josh, who is a much better lawyer than I am. And we worked together at the big firm for a long time. He was also my captain growing up playing soccer.
Man, it's you keep it tight.
I know. I'm very lucky in that way because he's a 10. I'm a little impatient for that kind of slow sales process. And I think I could get a lot better at it with enough effort. Fortunately, I don't have to because we got him and he's building out that team along with our head of growth, Grant. But just your run of the mill day-to-day sales, Yeah, like I could sell you this podcast.
Say, bro, you need a podcast? Yeah, I do. Did you know then, like when you fired up the painting business, that like this entrepreneurial thing was going to be your thing? Or was it just like another just sample size of like, oh, this is interesting?
I didn't know that going in. I definitely knew that coming out.
It was that like,
because that was the first, like I say, like real business.
Yeah.
You know, I'd made money and like sold things and had a couple people working for me doing like lawns and shit. But that was the first like real business where I had a payroll and, you know, we didn't raise any capital for that business, but that was a completely different sort of echelon of business relative to the tiny little side hustles I had growing up.
Yep.
But coming out of that experience, I knew that one day I would run a business again. And, you know, I was already lined up to go to law school. And, you know, at that time I also knew I didn't want to be the king of painting in Calgary. So for me, I looked at it as this terrific opportunity. I learned a million lessons. Most importantly, I found that spark again that had been lost since, you know, I was trying to go pro. And so even when I started law school, you know, I came in and I was calling everybody $500 an hour painters. They didn't like that. But at the end of the day, you know, both are service providers, and really where that kind of comes back to the Goodlawyer thing, which I'm sure we'll be getting to, is I learned how to estimate.
Yeah.
I learned how to look at a project and then estimate the cost of it and take on, as the business owner, a little bit of risk because I was the expert in how much the painting should cost, or the artist. And then I got to law and like nobody estimated anything. And I was like, what is this crazy talk? Like, why are we not capable of, you know, taking a good guess based on the million transactions or documents we've produced in the past and eat a little bit of risk so that the customer or the client doesn't have to, because we're the experts. But yeah, I would say, just jumping back to the painting, it was coming out of that when I knew at some point down the road, I would be running a business again.
When you said you like connecting the dots, how does that, like, can you articulate that? Like, how does that, when you look at a situation, are you just looking at it from multiple different angles to kind of piece it together? Like when you said it was like sales, marketing, fulfillment, like, is your mind just kind of like deconstructing things on the fly and then you're just kind of putting it back together? Like,
kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as we started talking about, you know, your business, and, you know, I think the podcast for a business that is doing, you know, high production video content in more of like the corporate arena, what is a better sort of loss leader or door opener than doing, you know, one of the most well-produced podcasts in the city and bringing all of these cool people who, you know, can further project your story, but at the same time potentially be a future client. Pretty ingenious. So
that's where your head went
instantly.
Fascinating, dude.
Yeah, and like that, I can't help that. I'm like, I see the world in business terms, for better and for worse. But you know, I think where I'm at today, I would not trade this to be a professional soccer player. Like this is more me than you know, being a striker scoring goals like that. That I would love that.
Pretty badass.
That would have been pretty amazing. But honestly, this is way more what drives me. And you know, I don't feel like I work. Like I work hard. But it doesn't feel like it. My whole life feels kind of like this big Goodlawyer video game, and I love that.
Can you the minute you said your mom was a psychologist, my mind like started ripping right away. How does that growing up around that, does it put you on a different path? Does it expose you to things or make you think differently or feel differently or have different perspectives? Like, is there anything, did you pick anything up or was anything spoken about
I think I must have.
Yeah.
I always kind of joke with my buddies that I've got an honorary degree in psychology, having grown up with her, and now my brother, who I recently brought on to Goodlawyer on a part-time basis.
Amazing.
Have you seen Billions?
Yes.
Yeah, he's my fractional Wendy Rhodes.
No way.
Yeah, every Tuesday he's in there all day.
No way.
Doing group sessions with my exec team, doing one-on-ones with everybody except for me, because we've found out that doesn't work.
Can't do it, yeah.
Brett, I'm not the one in the chair. We start talking about but no, it's been awesome having him in the mix.
Yeah.
And I think, part of my rationale for bringing him in the mix to begin with was, I was excited to get to jam with him on, in my video game. But more than that, I recognize how important people are to any initiative, and a business is just a well orchestrated way to orient a group of people to build something in unison, kind of like a team. And so I think it's hard for me to pinpoint anything specific that I picked out, but I definitely, and I'm not nearly as in tune with it as my mom or my brother, and we are doing some work on Brett to be a little more conscious of the nonverbals and the value, lots of little things. Stay tuned. I got a LinkedIn post coming out about it.
Need a video?
But yeah, exactly. Maybe starts with don't give up the fun or something. Anyways, it's coming out soon. But yeah, I definitely think that I picked up things. My mom was always asking a million questions, and in contrast to my brother does like one-on-one therapy, assessment, and now this group performance stuff for, these scaling companies, starting with Goodlawyer. But I've already got a handful of my founder friends that are like, yo, I need some of that with my team. And it's been incredible, honestly. But my mom was always more of an assessor. Like if someone comes into the hospital and they don't know how to like place them or what's going on, like they go see my mom and she diagnoses them like shockingly fast. So I think she's always had a bit of a harder time applying her techniques to her children, her sons. But yeah, all the questions, just getting comfortable talking about feelings and like all that kind of stuff growing up, I think, has definitely given me an edge in the business world, because again, and certainly the businesses that I've ran are so people oriented or focused that, even if I'm not nearly as empathic or wise when it comes to how to deal with emotions, I'm picking up on cues and things, I think, in a way that, maybe your average entrepreneur isn't.
Yep. Law school. Yeah. Once you're in it, like find your groove.
With all those $500 painters.
I was like, how do you listen, dude, I don't know the lawyer world. I don't know shit. I know a couple, but when you roll in, you're calling $500 painters. I'm sure you're a different animal within this group.
Oh, I was definitely one of the oddest ducks in law school, for sure. But I'm also pretty personable and fun. And, I'm the guy that threw the rager at the end of first year when, I'd say 80% of the graduating or like the first year class came directly to our house 100 meters away, and the roommates popped the keg, and we've managed to use those skills very effectively with yacht parties and the like in the Goodlawyer era. But yeah, I was always an odd duck. And I think mostly in a good way. Yep. It's an industry where I would say you get fewer odd ducks because of the barriers to entry. Yep. To be a lawyer in Canada, you got to go to school for like 7 years. And you got to article and, get hired somewhere. And there's a lot of cost associated with that. And, it's quite a long journey. And so, more specifically with the sort of entrepreneurial angle, there are very few true entrepreneurs, and I would put myself in that category, that can stomach 7 years of university. Yeah. And, had my dad not passed away right before law school, would I have gone? Hard to say. Maybe not. But in that moment, and people laugh at me when I say this, but law school felt like the really easy option. I could just, I was good at this school thing.
Yeah.
I could just stay in my same house. And, the law school was literally connected to the business school at U of A. And I could just go do that. And everybody around me would feel like I was progressing.
Yep.
But I wouldn't have to really make any, at the time I thought, important decisions when I was, feeling more kind of detached and just generally down than I had felt in probably ever.
Kind of, hearing for the first time makes sense because you put it in autopilot.
Yeah.
And just kind of cruise it.
That was like a positive progress autopilot that everyone's way to go.
Law school autopilot is it's a unique spot.
Totally.
Some people autopilot in different situations.
And don't get me wrong, I had like an amazing time in law school, not just for the parties and the friendships, but I found very early that I really liked this law thing. And I found it, even relative to business, like, my undergrad in business, super interesting, especially first year. We had like our little study group, a bunch of my buddies, one of them was getting married next weekend in Edmonton. We going back up for that. Shout out to you, Mikey A, if you hear this. But I really enjoyed the content. I really enjoyed the challenge and getting to, work with, smart people kind of across the board.
Yep.
I think 3 years is probably a little long. They should probably inject some more practicality into that third year if they're going to keep 3 years.
Yep.
But overall, it was a great experience. And then, working in the firm, being a corporate lawyer, having gone to law school, but more importantly, I think being a corporate lawyer has sharpened my pencil as a businessman.
Yeah.
And, I hear that a lot. I was listening to a podcast earlier today with Harley Finkelstein, who's the president of Shopify.
Okay.
He didn't stick it out for quite as long as I did. I was probably in the big firm for a little over 4 years. Maybe he was there for 1. But I've heard him say something similar where like just thinking like a lawyer makes you a more astute businessman. And, I think building a company called Goodlawyer is probably good that I got to establish a little more credibility in that sort of jungle before I stepped out. But I do think I think it would have been valuable to my career no matter what.
Yep.
Also could never have imagined being a partner in a big firm. And it's actually a funny story. The name Goodlawyer came from my first few weeks in law school. Like I said earlier, the business school and the law school were attached by this, I don't know if you've been up to U of A, but this like really shitty mall called Hub Mall. And it was just like a path of like, all your fast food joints, coffee shops, whatever. And I had my old coffee guy from business school, this old Lebanese dude named Mo. And when I came back for law school, I went to the old coffee guy, and it was a couple weeks in, and he remembered me, and we were having this chummy conversation. And then he asked me what I was doing back, and I remember telling him, I'm in law school now. And he just changed his tune immediately and got all serious. And he said, be a good lawyer. Be a good lawyer. He said it twice. I'll never forget it. And later that day, in contrast class, I was just like, this good lawyer, I like that. And so I bought
it all
3 or 4 domains and sat on them for close to a decade. But here they are. Like it came into reality down the road,
which is amazing. That the corporate lawyer gig.
Yep.
Did you know that it was going to be short lived? And were you willing to just kind of cut your teeth there and figure it out, or were you still debating with yourself like, am I going to be this big swinging like corporate guy? Or
I think part of like my approach, and it's kind of in the answer a little bit, I've never been much of a planner. I'm trying to become a better planner as CEO of a growing and more substantial and complex business than ever before. And I'm like consciously trying to get better at planning. But I've never been a planner. I just try to make good decisions that are like right in front of me. And, the decision to go to university, I think that, I don't know if mom would have ever let us not go to university. So that was kind of like default, but what to take? Oh, business, pretty obvious. From there, not ready to go embark on a career or start my own like real business beyond the painting. Law school is an option. Seems like a pretty good option to, keep this train going.
Yep.
And then same thing when it came to, getting a job at the big firm. I had no burning desire to be a lawyer growing up. barely when I was in law school, I would say. But the thing to do was to apply to the big firms because that's what all the cool kids were doing.
All the TV shows tell you to do it too.
Wow. And actually my biggest problem probably with like the profession, I got lots, but if I could isolate one, and you know, if anybody that is working for a law school, please think about this. They're called OCIs, on-campus interviews, and they go on at every law school in Canada, and they're a big deal. It's like, you know, they had to finally move it because in my first year, they started in the first month, which was absurd that you could have like your forever career 3 weeks into law school without having a clue what that means. But they still do it, you know, the next semester. And, you know, it's like the biggest sort of hiring piece coming out of law school. And what it is all of the big firms come to campus and conduct on-campus interviews. You know, it doesn't seem that bad or outrageous, but what it does is it creates the context within the law school where everybody, unless you're one of the few folks who's like, I got to be a criminal lawyer, like everybody else gets sucked into this on-campus interview thing. If you get the job, you feel like a winner, but you have no idea what the prize is. And if you don't get the job, which is the majority, like you feel like shit because you're not good enough. And it just creates this like toxic environment right out of the gate. I think at U of A, where I went, it was a significantly milder version of that. And we had this pretty great collegiality in our law school. But, you know, you hear stories about people ripping out pages from textbooks and stuff at U of T. And like, it's just getting really kind of nasty. And the funniest part for me was always, we don't even know what we're fighting for. Like, or, you know, we don't even know what the prize is, like I said. And I think promoting it in such an aggressive way puts blinders on those, you know, first, second year law students. And then, you know, the folks that get the summer gig are coming back the next year with their Arc'teryx jackets and their sexy backpacks. And like, they just look cool and they just summered at this firm and it was so much fun and it was great. And then by the time they article, they're gone and never come back. And so you don't see the reality in law school at all. And I think that's doing a huge disservice to all the law students and, you know, future lawyers coming up. And I just think that the law schools are in this really pivotal kind of place in time to have a huge influence. And, you know, they probably all have to do it at the same time because part of the value prop of going to law school is that you can get this, you know, big swinging corporate job that's going to like, you know, make you rich one day.
Pay for your school.
Yeah, totally. But I just really do think that if, you know, the law school's job is to set their students up for lifelong success, then they should do a damn better job of highlighting the alternatives right out of the gate. And I think to even the playing field, the most effective way to do that would be to just stop doing OCIs.
We'll clip this for him.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. I got a lot of opinions and I appreciate you listening to them.
So you're kind of 4 years at the corporate gig. What is that how long it was?
4.5.
And what's the pivot point after that?
Another pretty isolated moment. Again, I think a lot of these things, and it's funny because I've got a terrible memory, but there are like these standout moments that really get baked in my brain. And, you know, big firm, articling was, you know, a flash. And we were fortunate because, again, I had a great group of peers that were going through that together. And like, we became like incredibly good friends. I got a bunch of those folks on my cap table now for Goodlawyer, those early believers. And Josh, who I articled with, you know, he's our COO now. And articling was so intense, but kind of fun in this sort of sick and twisted way. Because we were going through this like really hard period. We were in the trenches together. And then you get hired into a group. I got hired into the banking group because I was like, all you guys fighting for this securities group, like, I just don't care enough. Why am I going to I'm just going to, over here looks pretty nice. That's where I got to meet Nolan, who was the guy that actually taught me how to be a lawyer. And full circle, he's like a full-time good lawyer now, which is super cool. But yeah, I got into the group that I was looking for, got to work with a bunch of great people, got an opportunity to go on secondment and live in Vancouver. They picked up my apartment there and got to work in-house for a while to try to bring some work back because I started bringing work in early, that salesman. Yeah. Weirdly early.
Do what you're good at.
But ultimately I was also, known as Mr. Ideas guy in the office. And that was not a compliment. They are not looking for ideas guys. And I was constantly frustrated by the fact that, all of these no-brainer initiatives that I felt like were just like crystal clear. Like, why would we not do this? Why would we not use like the baby automation software that would allow me to not put names and dates in like 200 documents every time I do the same transaction? Just seems like a no-brainer. Well, why don't you bill less? No, I am quoting my services, which was also a thing that like most of them didn't really agree with, despite the obvious success of selling services with upfront prices, which I learned from one of the partners there that happened to have the biggest book of business. It was like, how can you guys not connect these dots? They're so obvious. But then it was like the final straw for me, like that moment, because this had been percolating and all that time in Vancouver. I'm kind of jumping around a bit here, but my first week on the job in-house in Vancouver, my boss there came in, this is one of our big clients, and he's just like, Brett, you got to slow down. We move at a more gradual pace here. And we were like trying to turn them into a bank, but I was like, okay, like loud and clear, I will take it down a notch. And I hadn't taken it down a notch in, a while. And taking it down a notch opened up just a lot more literal time, but also just a lot more capacity in my brain to start kind of thinking about other stuff. Started listening to a bunch of podcasts, How I Built This, Guy Raz, every day on the way to work. And,
amazing.
That Goodlawyer domain I mentioned buying in first year law, I assume was going to be for a law firm. But that time in Vancouver really started to shape that maybe there was this other business model that could be applied in a new and sort of better way. And so that's where the kind of seeds for Goodlawyer really started to grow. And I came back and started doing my thing again, got kind of lost in the hustle and bustle of the firm again. But it was, that seed was still lingering, and my frustrations were continuing to grow little by little. And the final straw was you don't really have one boss at the firm, but like the guy that was most my boss out of anybody coming in the door. And I know he was like trying to look out for me. And I know he did care about, my success and trying to help me along in his own way. But he just came in one day, slammed the door and said, Brett, keep coming up with your ideas. Just keep them to yourself. And for me, the fact that they weren't listening to my ideas or implementing them was one thing. But the fact that, I felt kind of muzzled and I couldn't even share my ideas was sort of one step too far. And it was then that I started to really seriously think about my exit. And, about 6 months later, I managed to find a couple co-founders with, some different skills, developer, designer, and then shortly after a former Uber growth guy, Grant, and raised a little bit of dough from the owners of Ultimate Renovations. Check them out. They're the best. And that was it. Raised $250,000, quit my job, and then lived off ramen for a long time.
What year was that?
That was 2019. Left the firm in February 2019 and launched Goodlawyer. Well, started Goodlawyer March 2019, like a month later, like very close. And we launched the platform January 2020, right before COVID.
That, like launching, explain what the platform is, launching it just before COVID, good, bad. How does the timing all work for you?
Yeah, so
explain what it is first, please.
Well, what it was then is not what it is now.
Which
the only thing that hasn't changed is the name.
Listening to the ideas and like this, not surprising.
Yeah, and I think that orientation that I have towards just trying to make good decisions, taking action, has probably been a very good thing for the company, as opposed to having planned out the grand scheme at the beginning, because inevitably it would have been horribly wrong. So I think, for any founders listening, that constant sort of curiosity and willingness to iterate. And, the phrase that me and one of my other co-founders, Tom, our chief product, always like to sort of orient around is strong opinions loosely held. And that really resonates for me. Like I'm very strong in my opinions, but if you show me something that, changes that analysis, then like, cool, like perfect, new information. Let's make a better decision now. I've lost myself. What was the question?
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
One was what it was. And then 19 COVID shows up and.
Yeah, maybe we'll start there. So we launched it January 2020 and all we sold was $39 advice sessions and $25 per page contract reviews. That was it. You could, in theory, go from one of those services and like we could upsell you to a larger project.
Yeah.
But like on our website, that was basically all you could buy was, would you like to talk to a lawyer for $39?
This is where
Or would you like to get a contract reviewed for $25 a page?
This is where I kind of, I remember that like.
Hashtag wash your hands.
Yeah.
That was our first marketing campaign in March when COVID hit and all of these, small business owners were freaking out because the rules are crazy. And so we rolled out that campaign, type in the promo code, hashtag wash your hands and get a free advice session.
It must have shook the industry.
I mean, in like a
microwave.
Yeah.
The approach was like wildly different, right? As far as law.
Totally. It was incredibly different.
Yeah.
And, that's how we sort of got on the radar.
Yeah.
We got, that got picked up by a few publications and, it was like literally me and 3 dudes in my basement. Yeah. Where were we at that time? Oh, we were in one of Ultimate's sort of side houses that they, not even the showroom, like the side house that he has there in case someone needs to move in while they're doing a huge reno.
Yeah.
I remember we were so excited in that first month because we'd sold like 4 advice sessions. We'd sold like $150 worth of legal services through this website. And we were stoked. And then, the next month we did 8 or 12 advice sessions. The next month we did more. And then, for month after month after month, it was just like doubling for, I don't know, well over a year. And then we started doing larger fixed fee services. And then, we started doing startup financing rounds because we got a little smarter and we're like, you know what, we're really good at serving these startups and there's more and more of them in Calgary and across Canada. Let's like really focus some energy here. So we had like a startup bundle. And then, that just kept growing for the first couple of years, again, doing just larger, next thing we're doing international patent portfolios. I'm like, holy shit. And then it got to a point where some of our clients that we've been working with or customers that we've been working with for the last couple of years came to me because at this point, I don't know when Tay joined us because he was like the first hire. And then he offloaded basically client customer success from me, which was like the biggest weight off of my chest ever. Thank you, Taylor. But at whatever point it was, our most successful startup customers, they came to me and like a couple of them in like a short period. And they were like, Brett, I love the lawyer that we're working with. I love you guys. But getting a fixed fee quote every time is getting hella annoying. And that's when I was like, well, would you like to pay a fixed amount every month and you can just have more access to them? And they're like, yeah, let's try that. And I just called it this funny monthly custom service. And so we started doing that with a few customers for a while. And then I started hanging out with some of the fractional CFO guys, looking for new channels into what we were doing.
Yep.
And then it kind of clicked for me. I'm like, oh, we're doing fractional general counsel. That's what we're doing. And we just, doubled down on that probably about 2 years ago. And it's been absolutely ripping. We still do a lot of business with the fixed fee marketplace, which is where we started. But today the growth is vastly predominantly fractional general counsel and now working with even larger entities and embedding part-time in-house lawyers to augment their existing in-house legal team with like much larger companies like Hootsuite and ATV and like, you know, some of these companies that when we were selling $25 per page contract reviews, it was pretty hard to imagine us working with. And the last thing I'll just add on that note is our orientation around the mission, I think, has evolved a lot as well. In those early days, I was kind of like, boo, law firms and lawyers, like fixed fee prices, like let's make it more accessible for small businesses. And, you know, that is still like very much an important facet of the business for me, making legal services more accessible. But the piece that I think has really developed in my brain, and this is, you know, credit to Pauline, who runs our lawyer experience function, to Josh, and a lot of the other folks on the team, is the people whose lives were changing the most is actually the lawyers. And fractional general counsel is a hugely attractive proposition for a business that's, you know, spending tens of thousands of dollars on legal and still trying to nickel and dime and keeping stuff in or not worrying, you know, pushing it under the rug, or they got a CFO redlining or something. So it is like a really valuable solution that's in between, you know, big firm rates for a project or full-time hire, which is going to, you know, cost you like $250,000. But for the lawyers, it's a completely new way to think about practicing law. And, you know, I think a surprising stat for many people is, I think the number is 50% of lawyers quit being lawyers. Like, it's insane. 50% of doctors definitely don't quit being doctors.
You'd be fucked.
We would be. But, you know, half of lawyers leaving the profession because they couldn't find something that fit. You know, thinking about like tons of the women that, you know, can't raise a family and become partner. It's like you can't do both simultaneously. I mean, there's always jokes about the golden handcuffs in the firm and live-in nannies, but like they're not really that much of jokes. Like they're actually, you know, quite real. Or folks that, you know, just want to also build, like one woman we interviewed the other day in our network, Sarah, like she's an actress and like heavily involved in like the film industry in Vancouver. And like that doesn't jive with certainly not becoming a partner in big law, but also barely jives with being a full-time in-house counsel. And, you know, I think for a lot of lawyers, and I would kind of put myself in this bucket, but this idea of, you know, becoming a fancy lawyer, throwing the suit on and like, you know, having this like very like high prestige career isn't what I think a lot of lawyers are looking for. Certainly even fewer millennial lawyers are looking for. And I think there's this enormous opportunity to reshape a career that's, you know, not about prestige, but is really predicated on like freedom and, you know, value creation, and this opportunity to build a practice that fits your life, whether you've got young kids, you've got older parents you got to take care of, you just want to travel, you got a side hustle. And I think, you know, part of Goodlawyer's secret sauce has been figuring out how to build flexibility and security into one place. And, you know, that's why we've got a lineup of hundreds of lawyers that want to be on the platform, because it's something new, it's something different, it's something that fits.
It kind of, it's cool hearing it, just because, as you touched on earlier, just about not having the plan.
No plan.
Know, like when, but
working on more of a plan, but no.
But like you saw the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
You connected the dots. Must have been pretty quick too. Like once you start seeing these like fractional things popping up, you're like,
totally
tick tick, and then you're going.
Yeah.
That. Do you think it's important to be able to like to connect the dots and move with speed, or like?
Absolutely.
Those are kind of your.
Yeah, you got to be. You know, I think you got to be humble enough to keep learning, and you got to talk to the people that you're building for, especially in the startup world, your customers, as much as you can, and like, you know, not take everything they say verbatim and then apply it, because they don't always know what they want, but getting that constant sort of feedback and learning, and not just from your users, but what are you seeing in other places? Like where can you find parallels in another industry, like a fractional CFO that's been really successful? And then I think that action orientation is equally important. You know, we've got values that I've been kind of working on in the background, because I think we're going to revamp them. But from the earlier days of Goodlawyer, we always joked, can you do that? Do good, always learn, team first, take action. And I think the team like lives by those principles or those values like very well. But the one that I'm always harping on that is like super near and dear to me is that take action. And, you know, we're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. But as long as we keep taking action and iterating and learning from those mistakes, then we're going to get somewhere. And so I think, you know, especially for startup founders, that willingness and ability to take action and put your shit out into the world, maybe not perfectly baked, and then learn from it and come up with something better faster is absolutely key. And the fractional GC one is kind of funny because I'm pretty sure we didn't invent the term, but I'd never seen it before. And, you know, Goodlawyer has a pretty big microphone in the legal world, certainly in Canada. And the number of lawyers that now hold themselves out as fractional GCs on LinkedIn and things like that is mind-boggling. You know, we've got a whole bunch. I think we've got about 175 lawyers on our network now that, you know, are doing fractional GC through Goodlawyer. But there are thousands that now are pursuing this fractional GC career path. And that's pretty cool.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like once the idea is hatched and then accepted and people kind of see themselves like using this idea, like the top comes off. Like it's just
100%. And they're making it easier. It's fun as we recruit more of you.
Yeah.
100%.
You having fun right now? It's a shit ton of work. This is like not the replacement for being a striker for Arsenal, but like this is you're jamming.
I don't think I would trade.
Really?
I don't think I would trade.
Like a 15-year career being like,
no, if Kai Havertz was over here being like, yo, let's switch bodies, I'd be like, no.
Wild, right?
Completely wild, man. It's so hard. It's so intense. There have been very obvious sacrifices that I've made and continue to make to keep building this thing. But in spite of all that, I cannot imagine doing anything else. I fucking love it. I love the people I get to do it with. You know, one of the benefits of starting your own company is you get to pick who you work with. And I work with some of my best friends.
And that works?
Mostly.
Yeah.
There's definitely pros and cons, but I say the pros vastly outweigh the cons. And, you know, I like to think that I work with a lot of my smartest friends, you know. Not everybody can come and work at Goodlawyer because, you know, they got me on Facebook. But
I came off the bench in your grade 10 soccer team.
Yeah.
Can I get a job?
Yeah. I mean, Tay was my enforcer back in the day. But no, I feel super, super lucky to have found my thing.
Yeah.
Not many people find their thing. Like they just don't. And I feel like I found it in a super intense and like genuine way.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we've been able to parlay that into getting to work with a ton of all-stars who, you know, I go back decades with is a lot more than the cherry on top. But the whole thing is more than I think I could have hoped for from a fun perspective. And, you know, I get lost in the intensity sometimes. Stay tuned for that LinkedIn post. But I am appreciating it more, partly because of the work we're doing with my brother.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just, feel super, super lucky to get to build this thing in my city with my best friends and, you know, really make a mark on an industry that, you know, I may have stumbled into, but, you know, I think has a huge sort of opportunity to change and to, you know, become something a little bit different, or at least create another alternative within some, very archaic and kind of overly traditional space.
It's kind of like everyone sees you right now, right? Like doing this thing, whatever this thing is, right? You make a move.
Mr. Goodlawyer.
Is that the thing?
Oh yeah.
So they see you doing the thing, right? Like, I find it fascinating hearing the backstory, you know, just to actually like put all the pieces on the board and understand how it is, how it grew to what it is. Is it the no planning thing? I love it. Is there is it enough? Can you like tell everybody not to plan, or is it just so individual? Like just some people get stuck in this process, and other people like they lose the creative.
Yeah, I think most people, like the vast majority of people, default to over planning.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, like you can plan all day, but the future is uncertain. And, I'm so far on the other extreme that I actually do think that like injecting a bit more planning
but just a little bit, right?
Yeah, 100%, because you just don't know what's coming down the pipe, or, and especially if you're building like a startup. Like, can you plan if you're, running a painting franchise? Like, more so. I don't know if there's a ton of value in it, but you certainly can plan more, because there's kind of a path to success, which frankly we deviated on from the outset. But if you're building a startup or you're building something new, and, I think largely if you're just building a business because it's so unpredictable, I think an action orientation is a good dose of medicine for just about every entrepreneur. There are very few entrepreneurs that I think underplan and over execute. So maybe, there's 3 or 4% of the people listening that like, nope, you're doing it great. Like maybe you're like me and you could plan a tiny bit more, but I think, 9 out of 10 or more, that action orientation is super important.
It's been fascinating, dude.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, man.
It's fun to like, it's fun for me to sit across from people like you and just like, when you talked about that deal online, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that moment. And just, it's fun for me to just like ride shotgun on these stories, because I have these like little moments like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah. And yeah, man,
totally. From that moment to like, we launched a couple new features recently and that I was really passionate about. And so I was doing a ton of lawyer calls, which I want to be doing more of moving forward, but I hadn't done in a long time. And, one of them stood out to me, Tom Archibald. He's out in the Maritimes, and I think when he joined us a few years ago, it was when he was living in Toronto. Anyways, just like incredible lawyer, did the big firm thing, never really fit. And, as good as he is as a lawyer, sales, marketing, not exactly his forte. And so he became really reliant on us, over the last few years. And like, we've really helped him build this practice that might not exist otherwise. And when I was catching up with him, he was in this new joint, and he just like at one point stopped. He's like, this is my Goodlawyer house. Like, but for you guys, I would not have a house. He'd probably still be living in an apartment in Toronto or something, but he was just like so stoked on this new house that he could buy back in his old town. And the fact that, we played a material role in that is super fucking cool.
Dude, and those stories could be endless. If you got on more of those phone calls, you might be overwhelmed with that kind of sharing and story that these people might tell you.
100%. And that's why it aligns so nicely with our mission, which I think is a great way to close out, which, Goodlawyer's mission is to be the most desirable way to practice law. And, for me, what I've come to realize is if we win the talent, we'll win the game.
Yep.
And I think we're doing a damn good job on that front. And, who knows what tomorrow holds, but I feel like it's going to be pretty good.
Amazing, dude. Well stated. I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Opportunity. Opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. This city, has always been the Wild West. And I mean that in like the best way possible. And I think in the tech realm, it has come so far in the 5 years we've been building Goodlawyer, from what it was back in 2019 to what it is today. There's just so much positivity and momentum. And, Calgary's always going to be home. And I am so happy that I feel like it's in a place where we can build, a generational company in the tech world, in the legal world, from right here at home. And I think using, there can often be this like debate whether, the traditional oil and gas and, that world is accretive or sort of in competition with trying to diversify. And I think it's just so silly. It's such an asset that we have, like the infrastructure, the capital, the business savviness, the entrepreneurialism that exists in the city is like the best I've ever seen in such a small place, relatively speaking. And I think the future for Goodlawyer and Calgary are super aligned and both very, very bright. So opportunity.
It's going to be fun to watch you.
Well, appreciate you having me and so many cool folks on, my friend.
Yeah, man. Thank you.